Okay, so today I'm going to have a look at how I go about drawing some of these mountains that went into the recent map of Napa Valley that I put together. This is quite a different style of mountains. The mountains are much larger than in many of the kind of world or regional maps that I've done for fantasy worlds or for RPG books. And the request in this case was specifically that it should be close or similar in style to the kind of mountains that you get in a skiing map. So I'm not sure if you've spent much time looking at those sorts of maps, but you can kind of see every crest, every ridge. You can get some idea of how you might go about coming down a mountain like that. So the first thing I've done here is I just put together like the bulk outline. So this is like the top line ridge, so going across the top, and then a couple of interesting edges, so like the peaks of the ridges that you're coming down. So I took it all the way off to the right and then brought one coming into the foreground to give the mountain kind of a three-dimensionality to it, so it's not just like a straight up side-to-side peak. And then a little run down the left. Don't worry about making anything too precise to start with. You can always add more lines, and what you'll find is that things that are weird edges will become new features, new ridges, new cliffs. And then it's just time to like find the edges, find the places where we have a quick change in direction. But those are your like peaks and high points, and those high points will give you the ridges that come off the side. So as you can see here, we added some cliffs across the front, some horizontal lines, and I'm just trying to break it down and say, feel if things were falling off the top of this mountain, where would they run? Because those will give you your it gives a kind of organic feel to it. These things, remember, are often broken down by water, so you'd expect it to flow. And yeah, you just play with it. Add new lines. Let your brush wander. Let your brush kind of sketch and fill in places, and just kind of dribble down off these edges, and you'll get this kind of nice organic feeling, flowing structure. Yeah, definitely with this, there's a real reason here to doing it like this, and it's just that it feels nice and organic. The more detail you put into it, the more it'll look realistic. Again, we're trying to get the eye to recognize patterns. It doesn't need to be like super exact. It's just it gives a pattern so that the viewer's brain goes, oh, okay, that's a mountain. And then it'll just interpret all the little bits of detail, these little squiggles and scribbles that you're putting in there, will just kind of add into the overall structure and feel of the mountain. And even if you were to look at them really close up, and you'd find that, yeah, they're not actually an accurate representation of a mountain at all, but it gives the sense and the feeling of it. So it gives kind of this overall texture. One thing you might want to do is, when you're doing this, try not to fill in all the regions equally. You want some little clumps of detail, some bits that are a little more open. So here on the top left, there's some large, just white areas. And then those are contrasted with these kind of tightly detailed little crevasses and little ridges and little bits of cliff. And that gives the whole thing kind of the macroscopic, large-scale changes in patterns and feel. Which gives you a sense for the mountain. If you look at a mountain, it's not a totally uniform thing. It's not a single peak standing up above the ground, which is just like a triangle. You get lots and lots of little bits where you have like maybe a rock fall has caused a lot of detail in one little bit, and then you have a large like patch of grassy area on a ridge which is kind of undetailed and open. So even using just density of detail as a technique in itself to try and give you a sense of where things are and where they're not. And then because no mountains stand on their own, I've just added here a ridgeline heading off to the top right, so that would connect it into another mountain and another mountain and another mountain, so that you get a feel for these mountains as a whole ridge of mountains, a whole range, rather than just a single mountain in itself. Okay, so that's all line art in this case. Now we're going to do some shading on this to try and take this nice piece of line art into something with a bit more kind of body and structure. To set up a new layer, dropped it down below my lines, got a much bigger brush now, and I've set the opacity like way down. So there's like 10% opacity, it's got a variable brush size to it, but only slightly, and the opacity is also set to pressure sensitive. So even though the brush is very big, the brush's size is set to the pressure of the tablet. So if I press harder, I get a bigger, darker brush. If I press lightly, I get a small, fine brush. So a lot of cases in mountains, what you find is that the shadows are cast by a ridge line. So a whole ridge will cast one shadow. So you'll get quite distinct and clear blocks of shadow rather than kind of, if you had a, so if you think about it, if you've got a sphere, it's this kind of very smooth gradiated shadow coming around the side. In mountains you have lots of sharp lines, so you should get like blocks and chunks of shadow. So in this case I'm basically going along the right hand side of all of the sharp lines and trying to block in like a section of shadow there. And in this case I'm taking the light to be coming from the top left because it just makes life easier because I'm right-handed and it makes life very straightforward to draw if I have the light falling from the top left. So here you can see I'm just like blocking in the shadow like bottom right. And you can immediately see that the whole mountain starts to just lift off the page a little. And you don't need to put in very much. And this isn't, I mean, this is much, much quicker than actually doing the line art. So the line art gives us the structure and the impression of detail, and the shadow just kind of immediately blocks in this sense of dimensionality. It gives us the lift. You really don't need to spend hours and hours going into every single detail. The viewer's mind will absolutely just fill in the kind of structures that you are looking for here. So that takes a little bit of time. I mean, the first few times you do this, first times I did this, you go right in and you try and make everything look perfect, and then you come out and it just feels a little tight. It takes a little time just to kind of bang these things through again and again and again until you start loosening up and realizing what corners you can cut, what things you can do quickly and still get the same effect and the same feel. One great excuse for this is go and draw a big mountain range. By the end of it, the mountains you do at the end of your mountain range are going to look quite different from the mountains